Oh yeah, The Legend of Zelda. This series needs no introduction. Zelda is one of the most popular, influential series in all of gaming. However, in recent years, due to the immense popularity of the series, the older Zeldas have been put on the back burner from most of the gaming landscape. Let's change that. Sure, I love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, don't get me wrong, but the other games are still fantastic, and seeing them not being talked about kinda hurts a little bit, I won't lie. So we are going to change that. For the next series I want to cover for my channel, I will review the Zelda games, starting with, of course, the first Legend of Zelda. I think by now, in this day and age of internet game reviewers, you've heard the exact same story about how everyone started with the original or Ocarina when they were a kid back in the day, and how Zelda appeared in the real world and saved every Nintendo fan's family for some illness or something. But my history with the Zelda series is a bit different. Oh yeah, baby! Let's go back to 2014. There was nothing the middle school was more excited for than Smash 4. You better believe the entire autist of the round lunch table was talking about this game non-stop. Why is this important to Zelda? Well, it was when I got the game is where I discovered Link. I thought he looked so cool, which is odd. I had Brawl, I played Brawl, but for some reason Link didn't stand out to me. I guess it was because Sonic took all of my attention. In fact, I got interested in Smash 4 because of Sonic returning, but that's enough of that tism. And when my birthday rolled around, I was at Walmart with some birthday money, and my goal was to get a Zelda. I found Link Between Worlds, bought it, and my life was changed. Ever since that day, I was Zelda obsessed. Figures, shirts, plushies, the works. Friendship with Sonic was over, now Link is my best friend. Seriously, for a moment, I was not the weird Sonic kid, I was the based Zelda lover. No joke, some kid gave me his copy of Ocarina of Time because, quote, the graphics suck. Yeah, I am not kidding. One of these games I got first was Zelda 1 on the NES. I bought it for 20 bucks on Amazon. You see, I watched a lot of James and Mike Mondays, and if you know anything about motherfucker Mike, is that he glazes Zelda 1, almost to a, you're sure about that, buddy? But nevertheless, when that day came, I played the hell out of Zelda 1 and loved it. But man, this game kicked my 13-year-old ass. Thankfully, I had YouTube to take the stress off. Who here remembers Brentalfloss? He made game songs with lyric videos. I loved his Zelda ones when I was 13. Now journey across a spooky land. However, looking back, I don't think this guy can go a single video or a minute without making some sort of penis joke. And maybe she'll touch your wang, touch your wang, touch your thing, ring-a-ding-a-ling. I mean, I'm no one to judge. I laugh at shit like this. Let's get back on track. Before we get into the game itself, let's take a look at its history. I won't spend too long here like in the Sonic videos because I think Nintendo fans are better at telling history correctly than most Sonic fans are. But speaking on Sonic, for those who are craving Sonic videos, do not worry, I'll be doing a Sonic review every other Zelda review, just so you can get your Sonic kick. But for now, let's get nerd emoji. To start the story, I feel like it's very important to give a brief rundown of the Famicom/NES. Now, in 1981, in the arcade world, Donkey Kong was a huge success. Nintendo, who have developed Donkey Kong, was interested in entering the console market when realizing the hardware at the time wouldn't be capable of porting it accurately. One thing led to another, and in 1983, the Family Computer, or for short, the Famicom, was released in Japan, to a very good success, I shall add. After the Famicom was a sure lock in Japan, Nintendo set their eyes to the international market. However, at this time, unfortunately, video games were in a state of fading out. Everyone knows about the video game crash of 1983, but just to explain it to those who don't know, in the early 80s a bunch of horrible games were flooding the US market. Consumers didn't like paying a lot of money for a game, only for it to be completely unplayable. Pac-Man the Atari was a prime example of this. Nintendo was warned about releasing the Famicom in the US because of this. Retailers were refusing to stock video game consoles, undoubtedly because of the leftover stock no one wanted. So Nintendo got the idea to go through the toy market, renaming the Famicom to the Nintendo Entertainment System. The NES was released in 1985, and the rest was history. The NES revolutionized gaming. Before, it was like the Wild West, anything goes, but now, gaming after the NES was standardized. In other words, Nintendo saved the US market from going to complete shambles. There's been a lot of contrarians out there who dismiss what Nintendo did by saying, Well, in Europe there was no gaming crash. And while that is true, it's way more complicated than that. The US market is the largest in the entire world. Something for as big as gaming has become, the US is needed for it to, well, function. Without it, gaming would have stayed a super niche nerd hobby. Back then it was considered a fad. It's not up for debate. Nintendo created gaming as we know it. Trust me, I love giving Nintendo shit as much as the next guy, but history can't be changed. Like it or not, Nintendo birthed gaming as we know it, taking inspiration along the way, of course, but that's with anything.
Let's lock on to that revolution aspect of this video. It's very important.
Backtracking to 1984, Super Mario Bros. Was being developed. Game designer Shigeru Miyamoto wanted to create a game that was the complete opposite of Mario. Being a linear game, Miyamoto wanted this new game to make the player wonder where to go and what to do next. And being developed for the Famicom Disk System, this new game could take advantage of the add-on's capabilities, such as saving files. From the very beginning, the labyrinth, or dungeon idea, was a core element of the series. Breath of the Wild. In the earliest design documents, these so-called labyrinth levels would have been entered through the title screen. This was very similar to one of the inspirations for this game, the Black Onyx. I've never played this one before. Looks kind of ass to play today, honestly, but either way, this was cited as an inspiration for Miyamoto and the crew for what they wanted to do. Also, another very important inspiration was Miyamoto's childhood. So, Miyamoto grew up during the Dark Ages, where they had nothing better to do other than throw rocks at each other. So Shiggy would explore the caves around his house, using sticks to make slingshots. He wanted this element to carry over in the game, so over time, instead of selecting levels from the title screen, a huge connecting adventure, an open field where the player could explore, find these caves, and other secrets. It was around this time that the story and characters were decided on. The protagonist was designed after a medieval fantasy elf type. Link was the name chosen for this character. Link is a name that holds multiple meanings. From a scrap time travel concept, Link would have been the link between the two time periods, but most importantly, Link was made to be the link between the player and the character. Link is easily one of the most iconic characters of all time, and one of my personal favorite video game characters. Firstly, he has one of the hardest designs ever. I love the tunic and green cap. If Link was made today, he would not look like this at all, and I think that's so cool. There's a misconception about Link. Most assume we're supposed to relate to Link. However, the attention of the character was supposed to be stated as the link between the player. We are not supposed to relate to him. We are him. We place ourselves in his position as we play. Most links are silent and don't react much. Our emotions we feel as we play are the reaction. I think this element of the character is such a neat concept, it makes Link stand out. For the backstory, Nintendo hired Keiji Chiri, a screenwriter who worked on shows like Dragon Ball? Nice. Anyway, the game's setting was based around, again, medieval fantasy stories. The world of Hyrule was created. Some of Miyamoto's touch was integrated in there too. His love for the damsel in distress character type was made within the character Zelda. All of this joined together to create Hyrule Fantasy, Zelda no Densu, or The Legend of Zelda. Much like its counterpart, The Legend of Zelda was released to massive critical acclaim. This was just not another hit title. This game completely established the adventure genre. Sure, adventure and the aforementioned games existed before Zelda, but the difference here is Zelda was so popular, easy to pick up, and fun. These games started it, but Zelda was the one to make it mainstream. Every game after took at least something from this game.
There was something this title did that completely changed the game. Does it hold up, is my question. Well, let's find out. Let's review The Legend of Zelda.
Okay, so I've established myself as the guy who would go great, sometimes crazy lengths to review my games, but for this video, I decided to not use the NES to play this title. Why? Well, firstly, it's not for save states or rewinding. For this playthrough, I did not use these features, and here's my proof. There, see? I think using save states is cheating personally. No offense to anyone who uses them, but doing this kind of defeats the point of playing the game in my opinion.
Alright, here we go.
I'm mainly doing this so I can get good looking footage. Remember my Sonic 1 and 2 reviews? The footage there looked awful. That's because I was using composite. By the CD and especially the Sonic 3 video, the footage looked much better. The NES does not have any sort of RGB, just composite, and I know you can get clone consoles that can give better looking footage. However, I don't want to spend that kind of money on an NES of all consoles, and it would make this video longer to produce. So, Nintendo Switch Online it is! Ugh, I hate these borders. They make it feel so artificial. So, oh yeah, that's better.
Now, the story for this game is rather basic, but I find it still important to cover nevertheless.
In a world full of chaos, there was a land known as Hyrule. Hyrule was in a time of peace until Ganon, the Prince of Darkness, invaded Hyrule and stole the Triforce of Power. Princess Zelda took her Triforce of Wisdom, split it into 8 fragments, and hid them throughout the land so Ganon would be able to harness its power. Zelda commanded her nursemaid, Impa, to find a hero with the courage to stop Ganon. While exploring the vast areas of Hyrule, Impa found herself in the middle of a horde of Ganon's henchmen. All seemed lost until a young explorer, Link, drove off the monsters, successfully saving Impa. She explains the entire story to Link, and with this burning sense of justice, he ventures off across Hyrule, trenching his way through the 8 labyrinths to reclaim the Triforce of Wisdom, along the way gathering tools to aid in exploring the land. Once Link successfully gets the final fragment of the Triforce, he enters Ganon's lair, Death Mountain, and this is the hardest trial Link faces so far, having to slay the Big Pig himself. But once it's over, Link reclaims the Triforce of Power and saves Zelda and Hyrule from the terror of Ganon. Yeah, this story is as basic as it can get for a Nintendo game. The manual and guides provide a good enough context for me. It's simple yet effective. Comparing it to future games though? Haha! Please. However, I don't want to spend this entire video comparing Zelda 1 to future games. This is the first title. It established the formula. I'll give it criticism when deserved, of course, but I want to give this game the proper spotlight it deserves. Because meme on me if you will, but this game legitimately does what it sets out to do very well. Now, the natural question one would have is, what kind of game is Zelda? This was a debated topic for a little while in the beginning. However, Miyamoto himself confirms that Zelda is an adventure game that has some RPG elements, which is cool, and gives the Zelda games their own identity. Many games are like Zelda, but fail to give me that distinctive feeling. What makes a Zelda? Well, a Zelda is different for a lot of people, but for me, it's a little different. The Zelda games need a proper balance. I call it the Triforce of Elements. The first piece is exploration. Not every Zelda has to be open world, but exploring the overworld in most Zeldas is very fulfilling. The second is dungeons. There is nothing like walking into a huge dungeon, figuring out the puzzles, and getting items to open new areas. Most Zelda games have very tightly designed dungeons, which offer experience like no other. Lastly, the third is combat. In my opinion, the combat in the earlier Zelda games is fairly underappreciated. Using your sword and other tools to take down enemies is unmatched in this field. This might sound more complicated than it has to be, but lately, I was brainstorming on what makes Zelda Zelda to me. I love games like Breath of the Wild, but it lacks good dungeons, which is my personal favorite element. And on the complete other side of the spectrum, Skyward Sword has outstanding dungeon design, but lacks in other areas like exploring. Where does Zelda 1 stand? Well, the title screen is nothing short of iconic. Love everything about it. This is where the story and items are shown. Notice how it says look at the manual for more details? Well, we shall get to that. The moment you choose your name, you are placed right into the game. To start, the 2D Zeldas are overhead grid style. When you move to any of the ends of the screen, it will move to the next. Structurally, this is sound. Grid layouts were the norm for these kind of games, and it works. Zelda refined this formula. Everything flows with each other. The entire map of the game was designed on grid paper, so it never feels like something is out of place. For the beginning area, I think this is pretty genius. Your eyes are immediately drawn to the cave, and going inside will have an old man who gives you a wooden sword. The sword is the main method of combat in this game. It kinda just jabs, but I don't mind this. The combat was designed around it, so I never felt like I was missing out on something better. Combat in this game rocks for NES standards. It helps tenfold that the sword can shoot beams. Huh? Yeah, this isn't just any normal sword. In Zelda, the swords can shoot beams. You have to be at full health for it to work, but man, is it glorious. Fighting from a long range is super helpful. Enter a room full of scary monsters, shoot a few down before diving in. I want to know the lore reason as to why this happens. It is just only the sword beam. that's it. In later games, it's only the Master Sword and other magical weapons that can use beams, but still, it's so cool. There are also other tools you can use in combat as well, such as a boomerang, which stuns for a short time, bombs, which are mainly used in destroying walls but can also be used for combat as well, the bow, which shoots arrows, obviously, the magic wand, which shoots magic. Combat to me is varied and never feels dull. You can use a second item with a B button, mixed with the sword offers a great experience. It's super satisfying. Some enemies are trickier than others, looking at you dark nuts, but using the correct item will often do the job well enough. Also, yeah, Dark Nut. Dark Nut. So another funny thing about Zelda is the name of Ganon's henchmen. I'm not sure if this is some translation issue or trying to be unique, but some of these names and especially the descriptions are golden. Tektite. These spidery things. Yeah, the person who wrote this took one good look at this thing and went, spider. Peahat. Who thought this was a good name? Oh my gosh. Zola. Half fish, half woman. Okay, so this was before men existed in the Zola universe. Alright guys, now what does this look like to you? If you said snake, you are a dumbass! This is a rope, bro. Get it right. Keese, which are bats. Keese is actually kind of a cool name, I can't lie. Like. I think the AVGN clip should be the main description.
What's that? Well, it's kinda like... What? It's called a like?
Oh, and most importantly, Rock. Not to say there aren't any cool names out there. Moblins, Lionels, Octoroks, Rizrobes are all iconic. Getting back to the overworld, after you get the sword, what do you do next? Hope you have the manual! Yeah, so remember to look up the manual for more details? Well, the manual is the guide that you want to use for the game. It gives a breakdown of more or less every aspect of the game, and even a step-by-step guide on how to get to the first dungeon. They were aware players would have absolutely no idea where to go, because the game has an embarrassingly horrible map. This is just bad. Hell, it's not even a map, it's just a gray rectangle. The game comes with a physical map that doesn't show anything on it, but it does come with one. Of course, you won't get this playing the game today, or on Virtual Console, or on Switch Online, hell, even buying the game used. This is required if you want to have any sort of fun with this game. Please use an online map. Now, I'm not talking about a Let's Play or anything silly like that, I mean an actual map. It's virtually no different from using the manual. This is more up to snuff with today's standards. That's all. Using one may seem like cheating, but in my opinion, I think using a map guide enhances the magic of exploring. It feels like you're going on an adventure, mark the spot you want to go to, and go! This is much better than roaming around without getting anything done for tens of hours. I can imagine most people stop playing this game after the first or second dungeons. I feel really bad for kids who got this game back in the 80s used. And not to mention, the primary aspect this game ages the worst in terms of gameplay is how cryptic most of the upgrades, shops, and general secrets are. How would you know to bomb this wall? Or set this specific bush on fire, which, for the record, looks the same as every other bush on the overworld. I understand wanting to have that element of surprise, but it could have been handled way better. Some secrets are cryptic, and others are not. For example, have some walls with cracks in them, and leave the rest blank. Having every area look identical to each other would just increase the frustration, and yes, old heads, this is a bad thing. Without a guide, you'd have to waste so many bombs just to find one singular secret. I understand the complaints about using a guide for everything, because at that point, why play a game with puzzles in it? But this is different. There's no whimsical charm to setting 30 bushes on fire just to find 10 rupees. On that note, this game lacks very distinctive areas. Sure, you have the graveyard, Death Mountain, etc., but tell me, can you tell these two apart? Really? Well, these were completely two different parts of the map. I understand that this is a very early NES game. However, I think this could have also been handled better. Maybe bushes that are shaped differently, even by a slight margin. So for that reason and everything I listed before, a map is not only recommended, but in my opinion, required. And I want to stress this is purely for the first two Zeldas. The other games take the cryptic criticism to heart. But here, yes, please use a map. With a map, you will know which items to get to efficiently traverse through Hyrule. And speaking of which, the progression system in The Legend of Zelda is super satisfying. Starting from 0 and working your way up to 100 feels great. Throughout Hyrule, there are shops you can buy items at, some of which are necessary, and others will greatly help you. Like the blue ring will increase your defense. Rupees are the currency in this game. How can you get the currency? Well, the main way is to defeat enemies. Sometimes they'll drop rupees, which can get a bit grindy, but I don't mind doing this. You can also find NPCs in caves that will give Link a certain amount of rupees. If you use the map, you can see which ones to go to, but be careful. some will take rupees away. Fuck you. Since we're on the topic of NPCs, sometimes you can choose between a red potion or a heart container. Now, if you have any sort of intelligence, you would pick the heart container. Heart containers are how you increase your life in The Legend of Zelda. The heart system is iconic. Smaller enemies will take half, and stronger enemies will take whole hearts. There are 13 heart containers in total, 8 from the dungeons, and the other 5 from the overworld. Seriously, I feel so bad for kids who chose the potion and suddenly realized their mistake. Zelda is one of the first open world games. You can do pretty much anything you want, the exception being Death Mountain, which requires the Triforce of Wisdom. That said, you can get 6 hearts and the white sword before you go into the first dungeon, which is what I do every time I play this game. The sword itself has 2 upgrades. The aforementioned white sword, which increases the strength by 2 times, the magic sword, which increases the strength by another 2 times, is the best in the game. It's near the graveyard. I would highly recommend you get this sword. The monsters can get real mean, real fast. You have to have a certain amount of hearts to get one, but it's not too difficult to find the necessary amount of hearts. Speaking on dungeons, there are 8 in total, 9 if you count Death Mountain. Each dungeon is named after the map. The Eagle, Moon, Snake, Lizard, Dragon, Demon, Lion, and lastly, the swastika. Wait, what? The swastika? Yeah, so this symbol is actually called a manji, which is Japanese for swastika, but in Japan, there are no ties to you-know-who. It's more of a religious symbol. Needless to say, some parents back in the 80s freaked out when they saw their kid playing in the, level. These dungeons are spread throughout the map. Sometimes it's as easy as walking in, while other times it takes going through a maze or using the recorder to sink the water. So cool. To put it lightly, dungeons are huge gauntlets, often referred to as the underworld, sometimes in an ancient building, a maze, inside of creatures, whichever theme it may have. One thing that always stays true, these are filled with puzzles, treasure, and a horde of enemies to come. Each one of them typically has one big collectible that was likely the purpose of the structure being built in the first place, and in these cases, each dungeon holds a fragment of the Triforce. As stated before, dungeons are very much my favorite aspect of these games. There's nothing like entering one and working your way through it, and for the most part, Zelda 1 is no exception. Sure, all of them are super basic, but this is the first title. I can forgive it for things like that. I'd say for even being on the more basic side, Zelda 1 has a lot of fun puzzles, and unlike the overworld, it doesn't take years off your lifespan discovering what to do. For example, if you're in a room with dead ends, it's likely you need to bomb one of the walls to get a move on. The Eagle is fantastic at teaching the player how dungeons work. It's fairly easy to be done effortlessly with even 3 hearts. I'll be honest, the next couple went together for me. It's more of the same. The Snake stood out to me. This is the sweet spot for how difficult these should be. It gives enough challenge to be fun while also not being controller breaking hard, which is exactly what the next half of the dungeons are. Oh boy, these are hard! Which honestly, they aren't that hard. If you go out of your way to get all the hards up to that point, it's not too bad. Just make sure to bring a red potion with you and be careful. Increasing your defenses is also super important. I know it may seem like I'm glancing over these, but there's not a lot to talk about. I enjoyed the 2D sections, which they feel weird but work. If anything, my issue with these dungeons is the fact that they do not stand out from each other at all. The only distinction visually is the color. NES and all, I get it, but at least have one statue or something. That would make all the difference. I guess the enemies help too. Whenever I encounter the pulse voice, it gets my mind going. Notice how in the manual it says they dislike sound? Most players assume the recorder killed them. But nope, the Famicom has a microphone on the controller. If you yell into it, they will all vanish. Super cool. Not sure why this was left when it was translated. Nevertheless, it's cool to watch.
Wait, here we go.
Oh, here we go.
That's awesome.
Gosh, I love this clip. You'll be seeing these guys a lot during this marathon. Oh, and the bosses. Before you collect the Triforce, there's usually a boss at the end for Link to fight. One of my favorite details is how you can hear them from the room before. No other Zelda game has done this since. You got Aquamantis, who looks like a deformed dragon/unicorn, Dodongo, which is taken out by the bombs. Remember that Dodongo dislikes smoke? Well, use the bombs. Manhandla. Wow. Manhandla. What a name. Gilok, and yes, Tears of the Kingdom babies, This is from the first game. Dig Dogger, which requires a recorder he's impossible to defeat without. Goma, who you need to shoot in the eye with an arrow. The bosses in Zelda games are oddly great. Using different items and different bosses offers a very fun and varied experience. Death Mountain. This level gets its own segment entirely. This place is the stuff of nightmares. There are a shit ton of rooms. Get a map, chart out a game plan, and go with it. That way it's more fun than just going in rooms over and over again for hours on end. Ganon doesn't fuck around either. Please get the red tunic before tackling the main dungeon itself. You get the highest defense in the entire game. Also, please get the silver arrows as well here. This is required to kill Ganon. I'll come clean to everyone watching this video. This review was the first time I have ever fully finished the original Zelda game. The game was just too hard for me as a kid despite playing the game all the time, but going towards Ganon's room, I was super tense. This has always been something on my gaming mind, and this fight is intense embodied. The best strategy is to stand right about here and spam the fuck out of the sword. Once he turns brown, shoot him with a silver arrow and he crumbles down, leaving behind the Triforce of Power, and Princess Zelda is waiting for you in the next room. With the two united, that concludes The Legend of Zelda. Nowadays, most people lead you to believe that the first Zelda aged like milk and doesn't hold up in any regard, and I thought this too for a few years, but once I replayed it, I was shocked in how good it actually holds up. Yeah, it's super basic, like as basic can get. A no-brainer that the future games completely shit on Zelda 1. Hell, Link to the Past made this game look irrelevant. However, making this entire review, future games good, first one bad, really devalues what this title achieved. This game right here is what defined an entire genre. Yeah, it didn't create it, but it refined and perfected what was to be expected. Every single adventure game ever since 1986 owes at least something to this title. Sometimes it can be a bit archaic, lacking visually different areas, but on a pure gameplay level, this game holds up. It's fun if you use a map. I think any fan of NES games or even indie should attempt to beat this game at least once. I know I want to replay it again, which I thought I would never say. Take it from me, as a guy who started off loving this game, and as the years went on, I started to think it was just stupid hard and nothing else, but it's really not. I was shocked on how much I enjoyed it, and I think anyone who enjoys old games should check this title out. In our modern world of Nintendo remakes, I would love to see this title get remade, like how the Link's Awakening remake is, but with better visuals. Make it look more like Link Between Worlds, give the areas a bit more identity, and have the story be in-game, and I think this one could become a fan favorite.
I was not expecting to become a fan of the original Legend of Zelda, but making this review really surprised me. If I ever need a quick Zelda fix, I might pop this one again from time to time. But with all that being said, let's get into the notorious sequel. More on that later. nncreview signing out. See you guys in the next one.
Also, yes, I did not use save states. Again, here's the proof. Okay, bye.